welcome back to World Crisis Radio. So, derivatives, toxic, exotic, troubled, the Troubled Assets Relief Program, the TARP, the bailout of Paulson and Bush, supported by Obama, Pelosi, and Reid of September, October 2008. It deals with troubled assets. What are troubled assets? They're derivatives, all of them. Some of them are based on subprime mortgages, but they're not really based on them. They're side bets made while watching the bubble of subprime mortgage going up and then ultimately crashing down. So force over-the-counter derivatives out into the public, but do it thoroughly with a vengeance. Make all derivatives reportable, all over-the-counter derivatives, all private contracts, no more secrecy, all out in the open. Sunlight, transparency, as they say. On balance sheet, no more off-balance sheet derivatives. That is finish. No special treatment in bankruptcy. Indeed, gear the bankruptcy law so that derivatives go to the end of the line. They get triaged first. They get paid last. The Volcker rule and the Senator Blanche Lincoln stuff about commercial banks not selling derivatives, good, but take it all the way to the full Glass-Steagall, the full New Deal measure. Either a bank or an insurance company or a brokerage, but no more than one. You choose. Ban credit default swaps. Outlaw them. They are already illegal. They represent selling insurance without being an insurance company and without registering and doing all the things that an insurance company would have to have, such as capital reserves, reinsurance. They don't have any of that. They're essentially fly-by-night, do-it-yourself insurance, illegal. Ban them. Wipe them out. Oh, and of course, in Obama's, the Dodd-Obama, I guess we can say now, derivatives proposal, there's another big bureaucracy. This is a disaster. A bureaucracy for consumer protection that's going to be in the Federal Reserve, which is, of course, controlled by these same predatory bankers. So we have this phenomenon of regulatory capture, where the regulatory agency is captured by the fat cats they're supposed to be regulating because they're promising jobs on the revolving door, and these people get out. Well, that has happened to the Securities and Exchange Commission, especially under this character Cox, this feckless free market fanatic who did a lot to help the entire crash in 2008. Don't have this bureaucracy. Don't have it in the Federal Reserve. That's an obscene joke. The Federal Reserve has struck out. They struck out in 1929 on the stock market crash. The Federal Reserve struck out in 1933 on the banking crisis. They struck out in 1987 on the stock market crash. They struck out in 1998 on the long-term capital management crisis. They've struck out now in 2008, and they continue to fail and fail and fail. So let's give them another agency. No, do some simple things. Outlaw adjustable rate mortgages. They're a disaster. They should not be allowed. They're not typical of the United States. The British mortgage system, generally adjustable rate mortgages. We don't need that here. No more adjustable rate mortgages. No more payday loans. No more predatory lending. Wipe it out. Nice right line prohibition. Not much bureaucracy needed when it's a clear ban that it can't be done. So outlaw credit default swaps. Outlaw synthetic CDOs. That is the CDO squared that brought down Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, and Lehman Brothers. What are we waiting for? How many more of these banking monsters have to blow up? How many more depressions do we want to have created by CDOs before we ban them? Ban them. Don't leave it to the free market. The free market created them. They are the fruits of deregulation and privatization. Deregulation because they all were illegal from 1936 to 1982. The New Deal was right, and the Austrians and the Chicago boys were wrong. They've struck out again. Milton Friedman, von Hayek, and von Mises strike out again, and their dead hand now reaches into your pocket through the TARP and the rest of this stuff, which they claim not to want. They just create the situation where it becomes unavoidable given the way these things work. So you ban the synthetic CDO. You say if you're going to have CDOs, you can't have any CDOs in them. You can also do something called the reserve requirement. Let's look at the Goldman Sachs designed the CDO, Abacus, and Norma, and the rest of these things. They design them by putting toxic securities in them. Let's have a reserve requirement. Let's have another layer of protection. Let's say, Goldman, you're going to issue these abacus things. You keep 20%. Anything you issue, you hold on to 20% of it. So if there's a big loss, you will get hit. You'll have some skin in the game. But ultimately, of course, the overarching thing we want to do for derivatives is tax them. If they're so wonderful, if they're so creative, if they're so valuable in avoiding risk, then let them bear some part of the tax burden that the rest of us pay on just about everything that we buy, in many cases including food. The sales tax, the Tobin tax, the Wall Street sales tax, the securities transfer tax, the financial transfer tax, the Robin Hood tax, call it what you will, a sales tax on Wall Street turnover. And again, if it's 1 quadrillion of derivatives in the U.S., which I think is about right, or we can say 1 quadrillion of the turnover in the entire financial markets somewhere between 1 quadrillion and 2 quadrillion. Let's say it's 1 quadrillion. We'll lowball the entire thing. That means 1,000 trillion of derivatives and other speculation. A 1% tax is 10 trillion, and 5 trillion stays in the U.S. Treasury, 5 trillion available to distribute among California, New York, Illinois, and every other state in proportion to population and all the rest of it. Fair shake for all states. Revenue sharing, we might call it. That would be 10 trillion, and you can see that the deficits of government at all levels more or less correspond to the fact that the financial fat cats get a free ride, and it's time to turn that around. Make the Wall Street bankers pay for the depression that they've created. Make no mistake, somebody will pay for this. So if your only line is, I don't like the government, you lose, you will pay. That's a losing strategy. The winning strategy, potentially, if we can mobilize, is to say no to the value-added tax, no to the tax on haircuts, bowling balls, and all the rest of it. Tax Wall Street. Wall Street is the object of tremendous hatred. So the other thing we have is this $500 billion fund that Obama wants to create. I think that probably does set the stage for bailouts when the needs of Goldman Sachs and J.P. Morgan Chase and so forth the next time around go beyond the $50 billion that the bankers will contribute themselves. So I don't think that's a very good idea. By the way, they say we've got to have special mechanisms to deal with these banks. Well, they're all commercial banks now, every one of them. There are no more investment banks. They're all members of the Federal Reserve System. They're all subjected to the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation rules, and therefore they should be wound up. And it's another Friday afternoon, we're issuing our call. Sheila Bair, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, where are you? Shut down. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citibank, Bank of America, Bank of New York Mellon probably makes it, and a bunch of others, because they are bankrupt, and you're not applying the law. This is, in this case, we could probably pass new laws, but we have existing laws that should be used to wind up these companies. They're hoarding the derivatives on their books. They don't want to sell their derivatives or get rid of them because the price discount, the haircut, the bath that they'd have to take on their derivatives is so huge, they'd have to write down all the other derivatives, and that would technically bankrupt them, which, of course, they already are bankrupt and insolvent. But you can see what they've done. Remember that the TARP was originally designed to buy derivatives from banks, but that the banks then said, no, we don't want to sell you those because the price is going to be so low that all of our assets will be wiped out if we start selling these things. So that was when Paulson shifted his ground and said, instead of buying the derivatives, we're going to use this to put money into the capital of banks. So it means that the banks still have most of these toxic derivatives on their books. There's been some diminution in the case of AIG, but for the banks, they're basically all still there. These institutions are bankrupt. Mark those derivatives to market, not to model. Mark them to market. They're all bankrupt. And Sheila Bair, some Friday, come in and shut down the 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 biggest banks in Wall Street. We don't need any legislation. We've got it on the books. We just need public servants who are going to do something for the American people. So we will be in touch with you at tarpley.net. Tarpley.net, always the ticket, and we'll see you next week.